Hey, Bill. How are you?
I'm doing good. How about you?
Good, man. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Always good talking to you. I'm curious, Bill, as obviously you're now team employee and everything else, and been working for the team for a while now. Does it feel different for you, at least on the inside, to be a Flyers fan again with everything that's been going on and the new era of orange and all that stuff?
Well, I think that it's an exciting time, and not just because some familiar names are coming back in prominent roles, but you know, the next year or two is going to be crucial. I'm waiting with bated breath to see how it goes,
Hmm.
um, because listen, it depends on how many more moves happen this offseason. But
Yeah. Right.
the organization may be taking a step back to take several steps forward, hopefully
Hmm.
in the years to follow that. So in the immediate term, it may not show in points, but you look at they have two first round picks this year, two first round picks next year. If you play your cards right and you continue to build around young players and some of the young guys who stepped up this year can continue to advance, then you come on the other end in a few years after that, and
Hmm.
all of a sudden you could be a contending team for a number of years once you break through that. Once you break through that, it's always those possibilities that I find exciting.
Yeah.
And so you know, it's I guess it's the start of many things to come here,
Right.
and I'm just anxious to see how that all plays out.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, I kind of think just going off that too. It's like, I think for me, I think the biggest thing is just that you're seeing so much change, and I think the biggest thing that I love is just they're fully, like, obviously, last week they make the Provorov deal, and that right there kind of tells you that they're fully admitting to this rebuild and they're really going to take it head on. And obviously, there's been a lot of different changes. One comes today. Patrick Sharp hired and honestly pretty much Danny Briere's role before he was GM. Pretty similar is what it seems like. Just an overall kind of thoughts on adding Sharp to the hockey operations staff.
Well, I'll say this: Patty is a very sharp, no pun intended, guy. He's very hockey smart, just a bright guy in general. And I mean, he knows his stuff. He stepped from his playing career to the broadcast booth. He was consulting with the University of Vermont's coaching staff. But really, this is other than broadcasting, his first major step since his playing days back into an NHL organization.
Hmm.
Um, I think he can bring the benefit of his wisdom,
Yeah.
and when Sharp was on TV as a studio guy, he always seemed to really had good insight into how the game was played,
Yeah.
into
It's
you know,
funny. He reminded me of Bush a little bit on TV.
yeah, very much so. Yeah, very much so. That's a good comparison. And the thing too is that I think sometimes it helps to have had that certain personal experiences. Um, when Patrick Sharp turned pro out of University of Vermont,
Hmm.
it didn't click for him right away. Spent a few years with the Phantoms. He did win a Calder Cup, but mostly his career with the Flyers, he spun his wheels. He was mostly on the fourth line, and Ken Hitchcock didn't have a lot of confidence in him.
Hmm.
And and a lot of times people view people tend to I think overlook well, he struggled in Philadelphia, and he did struggle to a degree with the Flyers, but by the same token, he was playing 7.5 minutes, 8 minutes a night.
Yeah.
Um,
There's
they,
not
they,
much you can do
they,
at that point.
there's not when especially when a skilled player is not put in position to succeed, they don't they
Morgan
don't
Frost.
well, yeah, that I mean, I beat that drum so many times.
Yeah.
Well, put him with appropriate line mates, give him the right ice time, and see what happens. And
Exactly.
and and in that case, he goes on the first. He got the first. Like he moves up in the lineup rather not first line, but up in the lineup in December, and he leads the team in scoring over the final 56 games. And it could have been that close to the full year if
Yeah.
that happened too, honestly.
Hmm.
So, but Patrick Sharp was the same thing, and when he got to Chicago, it was a rebuilding team at the time. There was the ice time for him. He had the opportunity, and they could afford to be patient. So it didn't. If you look at what Sharp did his first season in Chicago, there still was an indication he was really going to break out in a big way the next year, but he did, and moved up into the top six. And then then after that, had his first 30-goal season, was an All-Star, the 3 Stanley Cups, all of that. But he understands from his own experience that sometimes it doesn't happen right away for a player, and the importance of patience, the importance of opportunity,
Yeah.
and the importance of the culture around the team too. He was a big part of why the Blackhawks built that winning culture in the room. So I'm very much looking forward to see
Yeah.
what Patrick's influence will be.
For sure. I mean, and just going off that too, I think it's really important too, because he's just, working with younger guys, right? And it's not just, because obviously like you were saying, right? All of the good things that came out of Sharp from, taking some time and, finally finding his way in the NHL. But I think also too, because he won here, and I think it was important. It might be looked at as crazy, but I think it might be a little bit different in a way, him winning here because of the lockout, right? Because, you had a sold out building for the Phantoms like every night when they were winning, right? I mean, there was no other hockey. So that might, I could be grasping at straws here, but it might be a little bit different in that way. But at the same time, it just seems like a home run of a hire for right now, hoping that can, kind of continue and go into the summer. But obviously there's been so much different things that have been going on and with hires and also rumors, for pretty much, it seems like until the day the Provorov trade happened, which was on the 6th, up until probably round 2 of the draft and maybe a week or two after, just going to be all different rumors on what's going to be happening with the Flyers. Is there any thoughts that you have on Hart or Lawton, who's been rumored, D'Angelo, just anything? Is there anything that you have thoughts on with just the recent rumors that have been going around with this team? Because once the Provorov trade happened, it just seemed like it just opened the floodgates for all the rumors to kind of just come out.
That seems to happen anyway. Yeah. A team makes a significant move, then all of a sudden, oh well, there's going to be a whole bunch of moves, and there might be.
Yeah.
I mean, A, because Danny said we're open for business, we're listening.
Right.
B, because they are in a self-admitted rebuild, so basically anybody could be available for the right price, and so I tend to take all trade rumors with many grains of salt anyway, and I tend to prefer to talk about the team as is until that's not your roster anymore, till it actually changes.
Right.
But obviously the direction they're going in, and for example. I would be surprised if Kevin Hayes is back next year. I don't know how or where he's going to go, how they're going to work it out. Mm-hmm. But I think even Hazy himself is expecting that to go down.
Yeah,
he certainly put that message out there on exit day. Not even that's what he wants, just what he expects. So for that, so I'd be surprised if Hayes is back. And the other guys, D'Angelo, it's funny because. Even though it was Torts that imposed the disciplinary action for him to be suspended scratched the final 5 games of the season, he put also, I can still work with him.
Yeah.
And he's unrestricted after next year. So this isn't a buyout situation. It isn't something where, let's say he goes out and he has 55 points, just say, right?
Yeah.
And he gets close to the trade deadline and the team could really use that power play boost. They're a good 5-on-5 team, but they really are kind of a middle of the pack to 20th ranked power play.
I hope so.
Then all of a sudden, you can trade at the deadline and get probably a better piece than you could this summer.
Right.
So I wouldn't be shocked if D'Angelo actually does come back. Tony certainly wants to come back.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it's going to be a long-term relationship with the Flyers and D'Angelo or just part of another season or but I wouldn't be shocked if he stays. But by the same token, if you get a decent offer, maybe you cut bait right now.
Right.
But that's a guy who, just because he's on an expiring deal and he can put up points and you know how he can help, in what specific ways he can help you, what his weaknesses are. I think that kind of sets forward about what you could expect to get. Right.
Yeah.
Lawton is a tough call because, and according to what the rumors are, the Flyers have turned down at least one late first-round pick for him.
Mm-hmm.
I can see both sides of that, right, Chris?
I can too, yeah.
Because on the one hand, if you can get a first round value for a guy who's essentially a third line player,
Yeah.
you might have to take that. On the flip side, even in a rebuild, you want to have veterans who set the right example
Right,
around the young
exactly.
players that you're trying to build around.
Hmm.
And when you look at that room, right, first of all, he's probably the most respected guy in the room. Secondly, he sets a great example for work ethic, for caring. I mean, Lawton,
He gives a shit.
Lawton,
Yeah.
yeah, he gives a shit, and he wants to do it as a Flyer. He
Right.
cares about being a Flyer,
Hmm.
and you want guys like that, particularly when you're rebuilding.
And he shows it too. Like it's not like, you know, like some guys, like, you could tell, like Giroux, you could always tell he cared, you know. And obviously everybody used to say it, you know, that he didn't, right? But that's just not the case, you know. For Lawton, like, you can see it, you know, the way, even just the way he celebrates goals, you can just tell.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's kind of the biggest thing out of it. But go ahead if you had more on that.
No, just to say that, you know, I think one of my favorite things about Lawton and is that if you go to an average day on training camp or a game, any game, any given game during the season, and say you've watched hockey for a number of years, but you hadn't been following the NHL lately, and you didn't know who this guy was, but you're coming there, and I would say to you, okay, you know, you would watch him, you think, well, is this guy, is this guy playing for a job? Is he, you know, is he a guy who's worried for? Is the guy who's worried he's like could be waived or something? Just because he gives that kind of extra gear, that extra effort.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like he plays like a guy who's trying out for a spot on the team all season long.
Right.
Even though he knows he has a spot.
Yeah.
And that's that kind of example, that kind of competitiveness and work ethic that you want him to have. And the other part of it too is that, of course, he drives opponents nuts with his chirping, but off the ice will not find a nicer guy. I mean,
Yeah.
it's hard not to like Lots. You know?
Yeah, I mean, and he's also just hilarious. I mean, I used to love the mic'd up videos of him and Michael Raffel and everything because they're just so funny. Just kind of going off that then, last week I actually asked Mike Knubel about the Provorov trade, and he actually brought up a pretty good point on how, like, GMs now, it seems like he was mentioning that GMs now kind of seems like that they're giving up on guys a little bit that are younger and maybe need some more time or anything like that. And, you know, we actually saw that in that deal, with the Flyers and Provorov for him being still relatively young, and also with LA for giving up Helchgrans to the Flyers. Is that something that you would agree with, since there's just been so many different things that have been going on? Because it seemed like that there's GMs that either give up on these guys when they're young, kind of like Tippett as well, coming to the Flyers, and then on the flip side of that, there's, you know, guys like Matt Boldy, Jason Robertson getting signed to these huge, massive deals like right away, you know, as they kind of hit that age, because that number never really goes down.
Yeah, well, I think there's sometimes an element of that. Sometimes one piece of it is that you don't, you know, like Tippett. Well, you know, you end up in a situation where you're, in most cases, it's the team that's been a playoff team. It's not usually the non-contending teams that do it. Mm-hmm. But you end up in a situation where, okay, well, if he's not on our team, we're going to put him through waivers. He's been through 3 pro years now, or whatever the case might be. And so maybe we're better off putting him in a trade rather than looking at a situation where he's not playing much, where he might have to go through waivers in a year. And I mean, in terms of Tippett specifically, you had to give something to get your. Well, a single first round pick wasn't going to do it.
Right.
Even
sure.
Even though they were competing against themselves because he would only go to Florida. That's why the Flyers got basically one first round pick and one young NHL roster player. When the ask was north of that, it was multiple young players. Mm-hmm. But I think there's a piece of that too, because, you know, if you're contending, the window can close quickly, right? And not just because of players' age. Sometimes you have to re-sign guys, and it blows your salary cap out of the water.
Right.
Or sometimes it can be a variety of things. You know, what happened in Pittsburgh with the window closing was they traded away too many draft picks. and now they're at the end of their window.
Right.
Um, the Florida situation. In the case of Helga Grans, it's going to be interesting to it'll be interesting to see. He's still pretty raw,
Yeah.
you know, but he has all those physical tools, and talked with an NHL scout. And actually, I've spoken with another scout subsequently, and one of them was talking. I mean, he likened him to Phil Myers, and he was doing it more in a positive way than a negative way.
Yeah.
But Phil was a guy who never really quite figured it out. He had all the tools in the world, right? Big and strong, he could skate, and
he was just an airhead. Yeah.
Yeah. He didn't have the hockey sense.
Right.
That was the biggest thing with Phil. And the other scout that I spoke with said, and I think this is fair. He said, a player has to find his identity. And he said that Grans really doesn't have an identity right now. He doesn't know what he is.
Right.
Is he a shutdown guy? Is he an offensive guy? He doesn't know himself what he is, and that's a big part. That's a big part of a player finding himself when he figures out, this is what I do well. This is what I can contribute to the pro game, and you eliminate a lot of stuff at your game, a lot of extra stuff, right? Simplify it for a lot of players. I mean, unless you're a super skilled guy, a lot of times playing a simpler game ends up being better for them. And Grant is that guy. He's kind of mistake prone, but by the same token, when he's on, he looks really, really good. So there's those flashes where you go, yeah, this guy can be a pretty good NHL defenseman. So defensemen tend to take the longest. Maybe goalies take the longest, but longer than forwards to develop. It's generally wings develop the fastest, center and defenseman, goalie.
Yeah. Goalies take forever outside of Carter Hart.
Yeah. I mean, Carter Hart's at an age right now where a lot of guys who end up to be really good goalies are just entering the league. This year, Carter's 24.
Yeah.
Henrik Lundqvist entered the league at 20.
Yeah. And I think, wasn't Jacob Markstrom 27 when he made his first start? I think.
Yeah, and Markstrom was a first round pick too, and changed organization. So it's not the easiest thing in the world, It's so I think, I do think that some organizations are quick to pull the trigger on young players and regret it. I also find that a lot of times organization number one, the team that drafts a kid, ends up getting the growing pains, and the second organization reaps the benefits.
Yeah.
When it clicks with them. Danny Briot's a great example, right? Arizona ended up on waivers.
Yeah.
And he was a first round pick and struggled to click at the NHL, and and ended up in waivers, ended up really not working out until he went to Buffalo, and then all of a sudden he blossomed in Buffalo.
Yeah.
That was that's sometimes my concern, where you see the talent that's there and you just hope they stay patient and let them work through it.
Yeah. No, for sure. I mean, it's definitely interesting because, again, and that's kind of, those are the players that the Flyers need right now, the guys that you can try to work around and see what they can end up being. Is the cup going to be out on the ice tonight, Bill, or do you think the Panthers extend it for another game? What are you thinking?
Well, even if Tkachuk plays, he's less than 100%.
He's at what, 60% maybe?
Yeah. He's clearly hurting. I think that really long layoff hurt the Panthers, kind of took away with the momentum they did have.
I feel like everybody always talks about the long layoff as it's like this great thing, and then it never works out.
And it seems like when you have that week-long hiatus, something, you come back and you struggle for the first 4 games after that.
Yeah, and you can never find your ground again.
No, I think that obviously scoring first is critical. That's I guess you don't need to say that, but that's statistically the case anyway. But I do think getting up and ahead in this game to have a fighting chance, even then it's not a guarantee. I think the series ends tonight. I do.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. They've done it before against quote unquote the best team in hockey. I mean, who knows? We'll see. Bill, just one last question for you. It's not, it's a question, but it's a trivia question. I figured you'd like this. I've been doing this more with people, and this now again, this is a little kind of a. Let me think of it's a really out there question. You're gonna have to kind of think a little bit. but it is a player that you know and like very much. Which player led the Flyers in assists in 1985-86 in the entire season?
Markow.
There you go, Markow. I knew you'd get that one. I was thinking of different things to try to ask, and I'm sitting here and I'm like, I wonder what I could ask, like as like a trivia to just kind of end it. And I decided, I was like, I got to go with Markow.
That's a good one. That's my all-time favorite hockey player. If I could play like any one player I've ever seen, it would be Markow. How cool would it to be a 40-goal winger who becomes a Hall of Fame defenseman? You know?
Yeah, that's true. That's really I don't. Has that ever happened before outside of Markow?
Who's been that good in multiple positions?
Yeah, and just switched and like, has that ever happened before?
Yeah, other guys have made the switch. It's not usually a guy who's as prolific of a scorer as Markow was as a forward, though.
Right.
Other guys have done it, have been successful. There have been Hall of Famers actually who played both positions, for a significant portion of their career, but nobody ever played both as well as I personally saw Markow do it.
Right. Okay. Well, there you go. All right. Awesome. Bill, thanks so much. I appreciate it. Always good talking to you. Thanks for your time and insight. And we'll do it again soon. All right.
That sounds good. Always a pleasure. We'll talk soon.
All right. Talk to you, Bill.